Welcome to the She's Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hey, how's everybody doing this week? I really appreciate you joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. Today's guest is Tanji Johnson, and you're in for a real treat today, as always. Tanji is an 11-time fitness champion, and she's a fitness and wellness coach. She has a long career as a bodybuilder, and she now coaches others in this form of fitness. And she actually holds fitness competitions here in Washington State, and that's the Tanji Johnson Classic. Tanji has graced the covers of fitness magazines, and just one online search of her images and you can understand why. In this episode, we talk all about what led her to becoming a fitness professional, including her time in the military, where she thrived and worked as a military aircraft maintenance supervisor. We wrap up this conversation with her thoughts on Black Lives Matter, including a really great lesson for me as she helped me better understand the movement. Before we hear from Tanji, just a reminder that if you'd like to support the show, you can do so with a donation through Patreon. By becoming a part of our community, you'll have access to bonus content that's usually in the form of a question I ask guests. In the case of Tanji, I asked her about whether she was in the kind of shape that she could do a killer pose for me. So you'll get to hear her answer to that if you are a Patreon supporter. You can join our community for just $5 a month, and you'll also get a heads up about what guests are coming up and have the ability to get your questions answered. You'll also be invited to join our private Facebook group, and that is ladies only. You can support the show by going to patreon.com/bebold. As always, sharing this episode with a couple of friends is super, super helpful to me, as word of mouth is the number one way that podcasts grow. So I would really appreciate it, and I'll make sure that you get some karma points for doing that as well. Okay, with that, please enjoy this conversation with Tanji Johnson. Is it a family name?
So my parents, my dad is Black and my mother's Korean, and they took an African names book when they were naming all of us. And I always joke because my name, the Tanji part, was in a long name. So I'm like, oh, my name means
Right, and they just pulled that out.
Yeah, they liked that. They liked the way it was spelled.
Oh,
and then I find out later that Tanji is a common Japanese name.
Oh, yeah. I could see that. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Like very often a last name. It's like something Tanji.
Oh, okay.
So they pulled that out of, so all of my brothers and sisters, we all have really like Zakia, Kanika, Sophia, Tayani, Tanji, Shani. We have very ethnic names,
yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up overseas, and that's something we can talk about, but I grew up.
Let's go for it.
Oh, we on now?
Yeah, why not?
Oh. You're so slick.
Yeah, I know.
I was raised as an army brat. So I was born in Bamberg, Germany, and I grew up, I went from Germany to Korea when I was 4 years old, back to Germany. So all of my young baby years were overseas. And then we came over to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then my dad retired in South Carolina. And so that's where I was able to go to high school. And then I went to college in Colorado. And my first duty assignment was, after Colorado, was Washington State. So that's kind of the evolution of just how I started off moving every 3 to 4 years, and then how I got planted in South Carolina long enough to go to high school. And then I went to Colorado, which started my love for the outdoors. And so when I got stationed, I requested actually Washington State, and I've been here ever since.
Where in Colorado were you?
So I was in Colorado Springs, yes.
Is that like the big area where there's the biggest military presence?
I would say yes, because Peterson Air Force Base is also there, and I believe it's Fort Carson, which is an Army base. All of that is in Colorado Springs, in addition to the Air Force Academy, which is a huge base of itself.
How long were you there?
So 5 years total, because the school, your schooling is 4 years. But then my first assignment when I graduated was to serve as a minority enrollment recruiter. And so that was a position I did for a year as a second lieutenant. So I got to stay in Colorado Springs as a lieutenant and have that freedom and enjoy living there one more year before I went off to Texas, which is where I went to tech school to learn about becoming an aircraft maintenance officer. And then I came to Spokane, Washington, and that's where I served as an aircraft maintenance officer.
Wow. For how long?
So Spokane, that was probably 3 to 4 years. I served as an aircraft maintenance officer on the KC-135, which is a refueler aircraft that we have over at Fairchild. And then I also started competing at that time. So when I transitioned from one career to the other, I decided to move from Spokane to Seattle. And that's pretty much how I got to come to Washington, and I've never left because I love it here.
Yeah, it is gorgeous.
Thank you.
It is a gorgeous place, and your home, which we'll talk about in just a minute. I want to talk about that as well. You know what? Let's go ahead and dive into that because that was my intention to start with just kind of the environment that you're living in right now, because I think you are so lucky given the state of the world. And first, let me tell listeners that this is the first in-person conversation that I've had with a guest since early March.
Wow.
So it's been months and months. 4 or 5 months. And so this is a real treat. So thanks for meeting. But you know, it's interesting, like the equipment that I have, as you noticed, you're like, oh my gosh, this like cord goes on and on. Like we're not, but we could be 12 feet apart, you know, with absolutely no problem and still sit here with each other. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of Zoom conversations these days. So this is lovely to kind of slip back into this. It's nice. Coming out to your home out here in Issaquah, if it's okay if I could kind of say that. It's absolutely beautiful. And we come out this way quite frequently to go hiking, like Tiger Mountain.
Poo-Poo Point. Have you done that?
Yeah, many times. Yeah, we used to do it as a regular thing. We'd come out once or twice a week.
Oh, that's great.
And just do it with a heavy pack.
Wow.
Like I have like a 17 or 20 pound pack that I use just for training purposes. And I run up and John hikes up. And run is a loose term, you know, when you've got a 20 pound pack on, which you know about.
I have a friend who ran or, you know, said she ran Mount Si.
Oh, yeah.
Not Little Mount Si, but the big one.
The big
and
one.
I remember thinking, I'm going to do, this is years ago, I'm going to do that too. It started off as a jog and just went straight to hiking after about 5 minutes. And I'm thinking, wow, she's in great shape.
Yeah. But, you know, trail runners really are like fast packing. That's the term really that everybody uses. Like you fast pack up and then you run down. So I don't think anybody's actually
running the full time.
No, it's crazy. But you are in this incredibly beautiful place out here. And actually, when I was driving in, I almost got like a little teary-eyed because it was so incredibly beautiful. I'm coming down this road and it's green everywhere. And the trees are it's almost a canopy of trees. There was just so much green. And I think now with COVID and everybody like really being kind of stuck, especially people who are in bigger cities, and like my heart breaks for people who are in New York in very small apartments and don't have any place to go. There has been this mad rush for people to go camping and RVing, and they're discovering the outdoors for the first time in their lives. And here you are, like living it. And this is, you said you've been here for 5 weeks only.
5 weeks.
Oh my God. And you are so settled in. Oh my God, you're so settled in. I can't believe it. I know that you didn't make a rash decision and just decide to come live here, but can you describe the difference of where you were before? And maybe I'm assuming that you were a little bit closer to the city, maybe more, it was more of an urban feel. And then being here in a more rural area in the time of COVID, and kind of what your perspective is on that, your experience.
So prior to this home, well, first of all, my husband and I are somewhat newlyweds. We've only been married for about 3 years. And so we have been renting together. So the beginning of our marriage, we lived in Ellensburg in a townhouse, and that was in the country, basically. It's a small town in central Washington. And we rented a townhouse because he had a chiropractic practice that we were trying to sell. And so we were able to do that after a year. And then we, started our practice in Bellevue, moved over to Issaquah, and we found a great townhouse that is literally walking distance from downtown or Old Town Issaquah. And so even though it's nestled in the woods, it is definitely in the suburbs. And we were lucky enough to find a townhouse that it was in a neighborhood where we're on the edge of the neighborhood, totally covered by trees. Our actual home was right up against the trail. So the trailhead was my front door. And
nice.
the parking lot was also my front door and my front view. And then we didn't really have a backyard. We had a tiny little porch.
Or you had a really big backyard.
Right. We had the woods to our right. And then on the left side of the townhouse, there was a porch that was completely fenced in. So I remember feeling in the first year living there in the summertime, it was great because I just thought, this is so convenient. I don't even have to drive anywhere. I'm literally going to put on my tennis shoes and just hit the trails. And I would have friends come over and they would park their cars, plenty of parking, and we would just go up the trails. And when we came back down, we just went into my house and had some refreshments. And so I remember loving just the fact that we're 20 seconds away from I-90. 20 seconds, so it was convenient. It was right against the outdoors. But as far as that daily living, I did kind of feel like we were still lacking something. Because when I love eating outside, I want to be around the fresh air. And every time we would go on our porch, it was enclosed. I mean, within 20 feet. So there was no green, there was no yard. It was just a wooden little porch with cement, just enough room for a grill and a couple of seats. And I just remember sitting there feeling like I'm enclosed and everything that I want to see is being blocked by this fence, which needed to be there because there was a sidewalk that separated, our residence from the next residence, and that sidewalk led to our mailboxes. And so it all made sense, but I remember thinking, I love the convenience. I love, the trails, but long term, this doesn't fulfill me. And so when we were looking, my husband, being from the country, he knew he was hoping for something with some land, but that's very hard to find. When we look at the areas that we were looking at, we could either go for the money that we had, we could either go really far, which would create a commute, and then everyone has to kind of decide about the stress of that and the quality of life and if that's worth it. Or we had to just be okay being in a beautiful neighborhood where maybe we're just, bottlenecked around other neighbors. And so this ironically was the first house that we saw.
No kidding.
So my husband saw it on Zillow and saw the property and thought, I want to go look at this house. And this is when we weren't even in the market. We knew that we were going to pursue a VA loan because I'm a veteran. And I was not aware that the VA recently changed their rules to where the loan amount used to be based on county. And so what we qualified for in King County years ago, it just wasn't the amount that I wanted to settle for as far as knowing what we're looking for. So then I found out, they took that limit away. Now it's just based on what you qualify for. So I said, we came and saw the house. We loved it. And then we saw a couple of others. And then we found out what I qualified for, realized it was in the budget. It's funny because we wanted it so bad that I felt like we kind of pushed it away a little bit. I felt like I was looking for things to be wrong when I first came in, like, the kitchen's got brown cabinets and I'm a white cabinet, modern white countertop. And there was just little things like that, like the bathroom has split counters instead of one long counter. I'm also very accustomed to an open floor plan because that's kind of really in right now. And my home is more traditional where there's a traditional living room, traditional dining room, traditional kitchen area. And so I remember going through that. And so I said, I want to look at other places. And I kept looking. And it was everything from, let's say we found a place in Renton, beautiful home, brand new, white countertops. But what I had to go through to get there, the zigzag through all the neighborhoods didn't appeal to me. Even though they had a little bit of pretty landscaping, we're literally just right up next to somebody else. And so after looking at maybe 5 more homes, and then I came back to this home and I walked through the little garden area and I came to the backyard, I just felt very private and it felt so open. And it keeps expanding because my husband keeps taking the weed cutter and keeps opening up our yard. And I thought, okay, this is kind of where what matters to you. And I thought kitchens can be remodeled. And honestly, once we got here and we put in our furniture and I put in some, lighting was a big deal. So we brought in certain chandeliers. We got pendant lights installed in the kitchen. There were just things that I did, white stools instead of the traditional brown. It just changed the look of the kitchen. And all of those little things, I just realized the experience of being able to feel private, have privacy, but yet have all this openness and being able to appreciate the beauty that I see every day. It just made our decision very clear because honestly, there was only one other property that we saw that had this type of acreage, and it was just an older home. And so this was the one that suited for us. And now that we're here, we feel super lucky because I still look on Zillow to see what's out there, and I just am not seeing properties with this type of acreage with a beautiful new home. This home's only about 10 years old.
So do you feel like your timing was super lucky with COVID, and you're kind of, like I said before, you've got these people who are just really craving the outdoors and the open space and the green?
Yes.
Or do you just think it was completely... Let me see how I can phrase this. So I'm wondering do you have a deeper appreciation because of what's going on with COVID, that here you are in your little sanctuary, and thank goodness you're out of the downtown townhome with lots of neighbors around?
Absolutely. I genuinely feel like it is a blessing, because I know everybody went through their journey of, okay, this happened to us mid-March, and mid-March things started to shut down. So mid-March, I stopped working. We were all quarantined. We were staying at home. And, every 2 weeks that go by, there's that, okay, how long is this going to last? And we all had to adapt to this becoming our new reality. And so there's the first 2 weeks where I thought, oh, this isn't so bad. It's kind of like not having to work for a couple weeks. And then the next month rolls around. And then next thing you know, I start getting into puzzling and watching every show on Netflix. And then June comes around, May comes around. And it's like, okay, I'm super bored at that point. It's beautiful outside, but now we can't even go to the park. And I've got a trail right next to my house, and I'm not even supposed to be on there. But yet I see people going out there kind of breaking the rule. And so there's this struggle. And so I felt like, okay, I live in this little townhouse with no abode in my backyard. And then the trails that I have access to, I kind of don't really have access to yet. So it was very frustrating. So I felt pent in, frustrated, was getting bored, and just trying to figure out, how am I going to live well during this season that everybody's dealing with? I'm not special. I'm not unique in this. We're all dealing with it. And so when the house opportunity came around, I just thought, you got to be kidding me. I literally went from feeling claustrophobic and pent up to now the only place I want to be is at home. The only place I want to be. And this is where I want to invite people over, and we're building memories here. And honestly, I pinch myself because I can't even believe we're experiencing this during this time where everybody is struggling to get outside, or they're sick of being at home.
Yeah, we have a deck with a view, and we have been maximizing its use, just making sure that we invite people over. And we've got a couple of little sofas like this where people can sit on, have a meal. Everybody's got their own table. We're at distance.
Oh my gosh.
And now I'm just concerned about what's going to happen come October, when it starts raining and we're all inside. Although your little gazebo here, I'm going to take a picture of this before I leave, because it's a great idea, something we might set up, some kind of a little tent. But anyway, all of that is to say that you have a beautiful place here, super lucky. Thank you for inviting me here and giving me the tour of it. So you had mentioned that earlier when things started to shut down, your business shut down, and I know you had some things planned for kind of the first part of this year. So what was it that you were doing at that time and kind of planning for that just kind of disappeared on you?
Well, in my 20 years of being involved in the fitness industry, one of the gifts that I discovered was that I love to put on events and I love to promote. And so I had 2 events scheduled for this year. One was going to be in June, and that's the Tanji Johnson Classic. And it's basically a fitness and bodybuilding competition where this would have been the 5th annual year. It's down in Olympia, Washington. And then I was very excited. I've been planning for a while. It's been planted in my heart to put on similar events for children. And so at my competition, I used to have a division called the Junior Fitness, where girls from the ages of 6 to 16 could compete in the fitness division, which is where they do athletic talent, like gymnastics, dance. They show strength and flexibility, and they're performing that to music. And it was a very unique part of my competition because a lot of promoters don't have junior fitness. And it was getting so popular that I thought, to do honor for this, I really should have an event that is just 100% for the kids. And I want to make it co-ed, so I wanted the boys and girls to be able to get involved in this. And so that was going to be coming in September. And so if those 2 events went well, I envisioned having multiple events a year. So that was one thing I was very excited about growing this year, was the events that I'm putting on for the community, where now I can service adults that are interested in that extreme level of bodybuilding, and also kids that want to find an outlet for fitness to showcase. So those were two events that both, of course, have been canceled that I didn't get to do, that I was really looking forward to.
I'm sorry to hear that. That's a bummer, especially the junior event, the kids event. How do you find the kids who participate in that? Because I've actually never heard of that before. I didn't know that there was anything out there, and maybe you're the only one. I don't know. But how do you find those kids and get them trained in order to participate in something like that? Is it all through the school system, or is it extracurricular?
Initially for like the competition that I had, where I had a little division for it, a lot of these kids were the children of the adults that were competing in my competition. And so, what's wonderful is when parents are into fitness, a lot of times it influences their children. And so when I had this division, there were several families that said, oh, this was a wonderful way for me to do what I'm doing, which is pursuing bodybuilding or fitness, and now involve my child. So it's a family event. And I even had a family award for whatever family came in, and I had an inspirational family award and then a competitive family award. So let's say if the dad did the bodybuilding competition and his daughter did the junior fitness, and they both placed the highest, then they would win that award. I also had a mother-daughter team. So this is a single woman who's divorced, raising her young 6-year-old daughter, and they were like two peas in a pod. Literally, she was competing in bikini and her daughter was competing in the fitness, and it was a very special journey for them. And they've been through a lot together, and they ended up winning the most inspirational award. So what I did on social media was I put out a post and I said, who has children that are currently either interested or active in gymnastics, dance, martial arts? And I had a huge response. All these people were posting what age their kid was and which sport they were in. And I thought, okay, that makes me feel comfortable that I have enough interest to have my first event, which is basically going to be a fitness performance style competition to highlight children who want to perform a martial arts routine or a dance routine or a gymnastics routine. And the final round is fitness, because fitness kind of incorporates all of it. And so really it's for people who love to perform, but they want to show athletic ability while doing it.
Right.
And it is very uncommon. It's even uncommon as an adult, When I was coming up in college, there was you may have heard of this, Fitness America pageant. And it was on ESPN2. And I remember thinking, well, that's really neat. It's a pageant where they're looking at your physique and they're celebrating your beauty and your physique and what you've accomplished with your body, but they're also evaluating your athletic ability. And it's unique because it's not just a gymnastics meet where women over 17 usually don't get to continue to be competitive gymnasts. And then you've got dancers where, yes, dance is, in the kids' world, and then there's professional dancers. And it just kind of goes on and on. So I just thought, how neat is it for me to be a former cheerleader and to be able to find a sport where I get to keep doing what I was doing in college and now actually make a living at it. So I became really strong, really flexible, agile. I expanded my gymnastics, learned how to do hand balancing, got into yoga. And I mean, it just was a place for me to explore a lot of different athletic disciplines and call it a profession. So it's unique. A lot of people have never even heard of fitness as a sport.
Right. And we'll get into that in just a bit, because I want to kind of go down that rabbit hole and learn a lot more about it, because I'm completely fascinated by it. But I do want to ask, are your events now scheduled for 2021? Have you just bumped them to next year?
I haven't announced the date because now I have to secure, there's some venue issues, but they will be, the adult one is usually always in June, and I do want to keep September as my launch for the kids event, mainly because what's going on with COVID is so unpredictable that I dare not schedule anything for the spring if we happen to have a really tough fall and winter with it being flu season.
Are you doing anything online, like kind of moving things to a different pivoting, as they say, and working with people online instead now?
So what I've had to do to preserve, I feel like my career is becoming a little obsolete at the moment because it caters to the niche community of bodybuilders. So what I do for a living, how I've earned a living for the last 15 years is by being a coach who specializes with physique athletes. So I basically coach physique athletes. I help them with nutrition, with training, most of all with their poise and presentation. So I'm a posing coach, and I'm probably the most established posing coach in the Northwest because I've been doing it for over 20 years. And so I've built a whole business on teaching men and women how to pose. So I have posing classes, I did posing DVDs, I do posing privates. And so all of that has been shut down because the bodybuilding shows, at least in Washington, have not been able to happen. And so if there's no event, then a lot of people aren't going to spend the money to train for something. Now, people still want to go to the gym and they want to eat well.
And they can't even go to the gym, though.
Right. And that's a problem, too, right? And so when it comes to all the extra stuff like purchasing their suit and learning how to pose, that's just an extra expense that most people aren't willing to invest in when there's no guarantee that the event is going to happen. So right now, everything has been getting canceled or rescheduled, and we're all just kind of waiting. So I feel like the last 4 months, that part of my career has been on hold. And ironically, with the timing of how my life has evolved, I do have a desire right now to reach more people outside of just the bodybuilding community. And when COVID hit, I felt like, what could I be doing right now? I'm probably not going to get to work directly in my career field the way that I have been for a while. So what can I do with my time that will be productive and move me closer to my goals for my career goals? And I decided that I wanted to get certified through the Institute of Functional Medicine in the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, which means I'm going to become a functional medicine health coach. And that's going to take about a year. So probably next June, I'll be graduating from that and officially certified and can start health coaching to the masses. So that's kind of a long-term plan for me. So in the meantime, I'm enrolled in school for that. And I am now slowly able to offer some online services and a little bit one-on-one posing, but it's literally maybe 20% at my normal capacity.
Do you think that community is going to lose a lot of people? Do you just think that being kind of away from the ability to compete or really to have a purpose or a goal to take care of yourself, to bodybuild, you can't go to the gym. Do you think that community is just going to lose a lot of people to, I don't want to say laziness, but do you think people are going to be discouraged enough just to go back to their job and just say, oh, that was that part of my life and now I'm moving on? Do you see that?
No, I actually think that the opposite is going to happen. I
Really?
think that right now, there's going to be two people. There's going to be the person who recognizes the circumstances and then they're ready to fight against it. So that means they're super creative. They're building gyms in their garage and they're doing outdoor workouts and they're still chiming into Zoom with some instructor and they're getting workouts in and they're eating even better, because they're limited. And then there's going to be the individual, which is like a lot of people where you just kind of succumb to the circumstances. You do get lazy, you start eating whatever you want, your lifestyle changes dramatically. But what I do think is going to happen is when the industry opens back up and we can actually start having more bodybuilding shows and basically there's no excuse and there's full access. I think even those people who fell out of that lifestyle are going to be so sick of it that they are going to be sprinting back to get started. So we actually think it's going to be great for the bodybuilding. Let's say things don't open up until next summer. I think it's going to be floodgates. Everybody wants to get in shape. Everybody's sick of the circumstances. Because, my career of being a fitness and personal trainer for the last 20 years, one thing that I have seen is that almost everyone will go through a season in their life, whether it's due to work stress, a divorce, having kids. There's usually some circumstance where they were active before and then something happens that knocks them out of their flow and they become more sedentary and they don't make good choices with their nutrition. So that almost happens to everybody. Now with COVID, I feel like that is just a blanket reason why a lot of people may fall vulnerable to getting out of an active flow. And because of that, I think that people are going to be in the masses ready to make those changes when there's nothing standing in their way. So maybe I'm being optimistic, but I actually feel like it's going to be great for our industry because people are going to be motivated to get in shape because COVID probably knocked a lot of people out of their lifestyle.
There's two things I want to say about that. One is that it reminds me a lot of the travel business. It's like there are some people who are fighting against the idea that they can't travel and they are desperate. I mean, I'm getting emails, not every day, but I'm getting emails every few days or once a week from somebody who wants to be put on the waiting list for, a future trip, or they're asking about, what I'm doing next fall. They're just so eager. They want something to look forward to. So there's that camp. And then there's the other camp that's just like, I'm out. I'm not going to do anything. Just I'm aware of the fact that I'm not going to do anything for the next 8 months or year or whenever, like you said, probably next summer. But when that opens up, it's going to go crazy. People are going to go wild.
I agree. I think I'm going to be one of them.
Oh, good. Well, come with me.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, where are we going? But the other thing that strikes me about what you had just said is that the type of people that we're talking about here who are that dedicated and are that aware of their body are probably high performance people, right? So they already have a mindset of being high performance mindset. So this kind of thing isn't going to deter them as much as it might somebody who is used to sitting around on their couch eating ice cream at night. They're going to eat even more ice cream.
Right.
They're just going to throw up their hands and say, forget it. Yeah. So let's go back now that I have a better picture of what you're doing right now and kind of what maybe the next year has in store for you and kind of how you're not only branching out, but you're looking forward to doing some things next year, bringing your events back. I want to know what brought you to this place. And I encourage people, I'll post some photos in the show notes of you in your bikini and your workout and your flexing and posing and just unbelievable stuff. That's another reason why I was so excited to meet you in person, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to see this woman in person. Let's go back in time and talk about kind of what brought you here. You said you bounced around as a military brat.
Yes.
You bounced around, so you have a perspective of being able to kind of rise to the challenge, and change isn't something that you're concerned about or that you're afraid of, right? That doesn't deter you at all. But you settled in Colorado for a while, got yourself to Spokane, still all military related
Right.
for you. What was it like for you to be in the military? And at that point, you weren't into fitness, is that right?
Not at this official capacity.
Yeah. So what was the military experience like for you? You grew up in that kind of
Right.
environment, so you knew about it. You kind of knew of it. You were living it without living in it. You were living surrounded by it. What was the experience for you?
For me, being in the military was like home because my entire upbringing with my father, he was enlisted in the Army. And then my mother came over when they got married and became a U.S. citizen. And so our whole life was...
And you said she was from Korea.
Yes, she's Korean. Yep. And I remember we're always living on base. We're living in neighborhoods with...
I'm sorry, they must have met in Korea.
They met when he was stationed in Korea, and then they got married, and she, left her family to come over to the U.S., which was very unpopular at the time. I think I just learned this year, actually, when interracial marriages became legal, and it literally shocks me. It was after I was born, in certain states. And so I know it wasn't popular for my mom to leave Korea and marry, an American. And so I just think about my parents' marriage, and then they raised 5 kids, and they were, I would say, lower middle income. And because 5 kids is a lot, right? And, when you think about the income of an enlisted person in the Army, and neither one of them had college educations. And so I remember being raised with that strength and that perseverance just as a family. And so my parents were very strict, and our upbringing was very strict. So I have memories of just responsibilities and accountability and rules and manners. And, the biggest thing I remember is as a kid, on Saturday mornings, 8 o'clock in the morning, we were woken up. And we were starting to clean the house. And it took I felt like it was about 3 hours. It could be my brother's out mowing the yard, and I'm, cleaning each of the bedrooms. And my mom had a checklist for every single room. It was funny because now I would think, oh my gosh, it's so ghetto. There's a college rule piece of paper taped to the cabinets, that literally says, wash sink, wash floor, stove top, stove vent. I mean, there was no table unturned, a lot of that. So that was super helpful for me.
Well, that doesn't sound ghetto to me. That sounds like just really organized.
Yes.
And very much like part of the military.
The ghetto part is having
right?
a piece of paper. I can't even imagine having a piece of paper, stuck to my beautiful cabinet.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
But as far as the organization, no, it was brilliant. And it absolutely, my upbringing, absolutely, from everything from my parents, they could be very tense. They were, they were lacking in affection, but they were not lacking in guidance, And so when I went to the academy, the environment where a lot of kids, I witnessed that they were shocked. They weren't used to being yelled at. They weren't used to being stressed out. They weren't used to being where they felt like the cadre was angry with them. They weren't used to all the rules and having their freedoms be stripped. But for me, that was how I grew up. I had to ask to go everywhere. Very rarely, my parents, I think, were very sheltering. So growing up, just even asking to go to the movies was a big deal, So for the most part, and my parents were controlling as well. And they know they were, so I don't have a problem saying that. Literally, we didn't just go into our bedroom and hang out and play whenever we felt like it. We would watch TV as a family. And if we tried to go somewhere, my dad would say, "Where are you going?" And it just wasn't a thing. It's like there was no playing in your room. We hung out as a family or we were doing chores. And so I felt like when I went to the military academy, it was just an extension of everything I've already experienced. And it helped me excel because it was normal for me. I saw the value in it because I understood, well, they're making us do inspections and they're making us follow all these details because one day I might be a pilot and I'm going to follow a lot of details. And if I don't, people might die. And so I need to be trained to excel in this manner. And my parents did the same thing. And so when I went to college and I was at a military academy, the inspections, the marching, the attention, all of that just seemed like status quo for me. So for me, the military has always felt like home. I'm used to being in a diverse community. I'm used to the concept of leadership being very prevalent and important and valued, and just the discipline and the organization and the structure, and most of all, purpose. That was something that felt like home for me.
Where do you fall with your siblings?
I am the second oldest.
Okay, and you said you have how many?
So there's 5 of us.
5, yeah.
My brother is 4 years older than me, and he kind of started it. He went to the Air Force Academy as well. So he was a senior when I was a freshman, which was really fun. It's fun and not fun.
In what way?
Oh, it's just, he was a member of the Cadet Honor Guard, which is the most militant organization you can join at a military school. They are responsible for the funeral detail, color guard. So if you've ever seen, at a football game, the color guard come out and present the colors during the national anthem, that is the Honor Guard. And if you've ever seen military drill exhibitions where you see them holding the guns and they're flipping them, and that's the Honor Guard. And so my brother was on that organization, and it's a very difficult organization to excel in because they literally are trying to weed out the weak. And so let's say there's 40 students that come out for this team. By the end of it, there's 16. And I won't use this word now because things have changed so much in the military, but it's almost like you're going out to practice every day getting hazed. You're going to get yelled at. You're going to have to run in boots with the gun, and they're going to break you down mentally to make you tough so that when it comes time to perform, you perform well under pressure and you learn how to become one person. That's what's so wonderful about the exhibition drill team, or anytime you see exhibition dance and you're like, wow, those girls are so synchronized. Those soldiers are so synchronized in their movement. They have so much discipline. They don't even blink. They all do the turn at the exact same second. And that takes a lot of focus. Like you have to put your ego aside and basically say that you're a part of this one unit and you're going to do the exact exact same thing for the purpose of being precise. And so the precision that I learned just from being on the honor guard really helped me become a really great coach. So when I say fun and not fun, my brother was a senior, I was a freshman, so he was one of the ones, yelling at us and yelling at me, and he was a big deal at the time. So when I came in as a freshman, there's that taunting, all right, Johnson, you have a lot to prove, you're going to fill your brother's shoes, and, we hope you represent, all of that.
And you did,
yes.
Didn't you?
Yes,
yeah.
It helped me rise.
Yeah, interesting. And that was at the military academy.
Yes.
And where did you go?
And that was in Colorado Springs.
Okay, that was Colorado Springs. And then, so 3 siblings.
After that. So then I have a sister, and we're 5 years apart, and another sister, and we're 5 years apart. So all my sisters and I are 5 years apart. After me, there's a brother. So I have an older brother who's 4 years older, a brother who's 1 year younger, and he actually went into the Army, and then my 2 sisters. They didn't go into the military. So there's 5 of us, 3 girls, 2 boys, a basketball team.
Did they just totally reject the whole discipline, military, and are they vagabonds somewhere?
I would say my sister, she is in corporate America. I think that she knew in advance that she was going to need more freedom. And my youngest sister, she's very creative and artistic. And so I just didn't think she felt like the military was going to be a good fit for her strengths. And so you look at her now, and she's a hairstylist and a makeup artist, totally thriving in that career. And then my other sister works in corporate America. She's an executive assistant.
So after Colorado, you got yourself to Spokane.
Yes.
But there you were a mechanic. You were an
aircraft maintenance officer.
Aircraft maintenance officer.
Yes.
Thank you.
I wish I was a mechanic. That would be a really cool skill to have. Okay. When you think of the military, or you think of any company, you're going to have your white collar managers and then your blue collar workers who are the technicians. So in the military, it's very similar. Your officers are like your white collar. We are the leaders and the managers and the supervisors. And then you have your enlisted who are the blue collar, and they're actually the ones that get the job done. And so when my father was in the military, he was a technician, so he was enlisted. As an aircraft maintenance officer, that means that I am in charge and manage all the mechanics that are getting the job done. And I report to the colonel to basically say, okay, this is how things are going. This is what supplies we need. This is what's happening with personnel. But I'm not actually the one out on the airplane. There was a few times where, I did get to change the oil, the engine oil of a KC-135. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
That is a cool thing, a good thing for the resume for sure. So in that particular instance, and thank you for clarifying that for me, as an officer, and then you're overseeing the actual crews that are doing the work, you're an African-American woman. Mm-hmm. How was that received?
In my career field, I actually didn't notice the fact that I was Black being as much of an issue as being a woman in a male-dominating career field. So when you think of aircraft maintenance, it's probably 90 to 95% male, especially on the enlisted side. I think that we probably have more female officers that are doing the supervisors. So I remember at times hearing amongst my troops words slip out like broad and chick that just really rubbed me the wrong way. Or there was even, I was made aware that I was coming down the hall and a soldier, whispered to another soldier just a comment of something that they would want to do to me sexually. And I remember being more frustrated with that because at that point in my career, especially after being raised by my father, I for some reason have been very drawn to masculine things. I remember caring more about being strong than being pretty. I cared more about being respected than being attractive to someone. And so I remember feeling like makeup was minimum. I never got my nails done. I didn't wear jewelry. And I thought, I want to make sure that I'm not putting any energy into that because I really need my guys to see me as their leader, not their female leader, but just their leader. And I was disappointed to find that on a very basic level, no matter what effort I put out, it didn't really stop that natural tendency for a man to still view you as a woman. So I felt like I had a little bit of an uphill battle, but it wasn't impossible.
But not even just a woman, but as a sexual being.
Yes.
Like that to me is a bigger thing. Like there could be, you could be perceived as a woman and maybe quote unquote the weaker sex, but they're turning it into a sexual thing,
Yes.
which is disappointing.
Yes.
Did you ever feel threatened by those kinds of comments, or did you just let that roll over you?
It was more disappointing to me. But what was very satisfying, and that's why when I look at things, it's like, it's human nature, depending on the person or the guy, right? But what I found very encouraging is that given enough time, and for some people it was a matter of weeks, for some it was a matter of months, but because of who I was as a leader, because of the leadership I provided, the way I treated my troops, I felt like it just really didn't take long to where I genuinely felt like I had the respect of my troops. And so even though I may have been disappointed that they could not separate it, eventually they gave me what I ultimately deserved, and that was their respect. I can't tell a man, hey, don't be a man and have sexual thoughts, because that's just you. But you can respect me in a way to allow me to a place to grow like my male constituents.
Do you think that you learned that from having an older brother and a younger brother? Kind of, I would say, and this is just my word, like more of a tomboy attitude. So older brother, younger brother, and then military on top of it? Or do you think that came from somewhere else?
No, I think probably my dad was probably the strongest influence. I felt like he wasn't so traditional where there were separate roles for the females and the males in my family. We were all out there doing yard work, all out there raking. I felt like he started that. And then because in high school I was involved in ROTC, which is the Reserve Officers Training Corps. It's basically a preliminary program for people that want to go into the military. Just being in that environment, which is very neutral when it comes to gender, I felt like I was thriving and living those type of experience at a very young age. So it just came natural for me by the time I was in the military. In fact, it was more of an evolution how I was able to bring out my femininity later when I got into the fitness industry, realizing that for so many years, I suppressed it. I suppressed it for preservation. And then later when I became a fitness professional, I actually saw the need to bring out more femininity, even as it pertained to my business. How am I going to attract more women to be coached by me if they don't look up to me as someone they want to follow? And femininity is very important to a lot of women, and it became important to me too. It just wasn't when I was younger.
So how did you make that transition from the military into the fitness world?
So when I was at the academy, I was on the honor guard, which, was the drill, precision drill. And then as a junior, I've always been attracted to dance and gymnastics. I just never got to do any of that formally when I was growing up because we couldn't afford it. But I've always been attracted to it. So when I was a junior and I realized that they were having auditions and tryouts for the varsity cheerleading team at the Air Force Academy, I thought, I'm really fit. I'm athletic and, I can do toe touches and, I could learn how to do flips. And so I tried out and I made the team. And that's kind of when I started to realize, like, wow, I actually have some genetic athletic talent. Because I remember the coach saying, I'm going to need everyone by the end of this month to learn how to do a standing back handspring and a standing back tuck. Those are two gymnastics type flips. And at the time I couldn't do it. And I remember not being afraid, but basically telling one of my teammates, hey, can you spot me? Just make sure I don't fall, but I'm going to go for it. I'm going to jump and try to pull my legs in and see if I can flip and make it land on my feet. And so that happened and I nailed it. I just, maybe not the best form, but I got up and around and landed on my feet and I just started learning how to tumble. And that's when I realized, wow, I'm really good at this. Like I've got good self-awareness with my body movement. I've got power in my legs. I'm strong. I've got a strong core. And I started cheerleading, and cheerleading is an extremely feminine sport. So it was actually really funny because a lot of the cadets that knew me, they saw me go from the most military, basically organization. 2 years later, I'm rah-rah and being thrown up in the air, doing splits and all these crazy things, super feminine sport 3 years later, And so I think that's kind of when I first started to realize I can be both.
Oh,
I can be tough. I can be strong. I can be beautiful.
Right.
I can be spirited. And nobody can limit me. And I realized I love all of it. I do love all of it. And so that's when I started cheerleading. And then when I graduated, I remember feeling unfulfilled that I'm about to be a lieutenant in the Air Force. I'm only 22 years old, and cheerleading because I'm graduating is over for me. I did a little bit of coaching with some of those big organizations, but for the most part, I thought, what's next for me? I've just revived this passion for athleticism, and what is there for me to do? I'm not into baseball. I don't play basketball. What am I going to do? And then on TV, I was seeing these images of the Fitness America pageant, and I would see these beautiful women that looked the way that I was starting to look as far as this sleek, athletic, lean physique, and they were out there doing everything that I loved. They were dancing, they were doing flips, they were doing strong push-ups, and they were entertaining. They were performing, and I thought, well, that's totally me. That's what I should be doing next. And so in Colorado in 1998, I did my first competition.
So you're still in the military and you're also pursuing this.
Right.
Okay.
And so, it was really great because I got stationed in Texas to go to my aircraft maintenance school. And that's when I did the Texas Fitness America. So I won the Texas Fitness America.
No kidding.
And then I got stationed in Colorado. And I did a couple competitions in Colorado, did a couple competitions in Texas, moved to Washington. And that's honestly where my amateur career just took off. I pretty much was winning every competition I was doing. And then in 2001, I remember it was right after 9/11, because people weren't traveling for about a month or so, and then things started to open up. And I went to Atlanta, Georgia to compete in a national competition. And I didn't have high expectations because I've always been super humble as far as, I may be really good in Washington State, but there's other 49 states, And I won the whole thing and earned my pro status in 2001. And so here I am, still a soldier in the military with a couple of years to go. So when that time came, I was competing as a pro. It was becoming more difficult. Like I'd have to get permission to take leave. I was sponsored by Air Force Sports for a little while. And when I realized that I think there was a big path of where I could go, I had to make that decision. It's either going to be really hard for me and this will constantly be a hobby, or I really need to continue to commit to the military. So which is it going to be? And I realized I learned a lot about myself because I put myself through this romance of self-discovery where I realized I love leading people and I love organizations and I'm passionate about fitness. I wasn't necessarily passionate about the airplane business, but I was great with people and I loved being with people. And I think it just hit me that there was a little bit of that awkwardness of I almost felt obligated because it was my family pattern. My dad retired after 20 years being in the Army. My brother was, a pilot in the Air Force, and I went to the Air Force Academy. And, a lot of people don't just go to those academies and just get out after 5 years. They make it a career. But I realized there was something that just made my heart flutter and put me on fire that the military didn't, at least not that career field. And I just knew what I was going to miss about the military. I knew I was going to miss the community and I was going to miss the mission and doing something that was above yourself. But I knew that a lot of those qualities that I loved about the military, I could find it in the fitness industry. And so that's what gave me the courage to basically make that decision. I'm going to get out and I'm going to start a career in the fitness industry.
So this is, my ignorance in terms of military and someone's involvement in it. But you're saying that you can be, this is going to sound really crazy, but I'm just going to put it in a really weird way. It's like you can be in the military and you can also have a life. So you were in the military, yet you said, I want to pursue this thing. So whatever evenings, weekends, when you weren't on your 9-to-5 job or whatever your hours were, you were able to pursue these other things.
Yes.
And I guess I think of the military life as something that is you're much more tied into, and you don't have a lot of flexibility or freedom within that. But am I wrong about that?
Not necessarily. I think it depends on the season of your career and what your job is. So, for example, I was an aircraft maintenance officer. For the most part, that was a 8 to 4 or 5 p.m. job. So I would go to the gym in the evening from 4 to 6, and then I'd come home and do my food. And on the weekends, if it was within short distance, so I competed a lot in Spokane, or I would drive over to Seattle where a lot of the competitions were when I was living in Spokane, and I would do those competitions on a Saturday, drive back on a Sunday. And anytime I needed to do like a national competition, this is where I'd have to take leave because I'd need to travel on a Thursday. But like I said, it wasn't super convenient. And then when Kosovo happened in, I think it was 99 to 2000, when Operation Allied Force was going on with the Kosovo conflict, I got stationed, or not, I went TDY to RAF Mildenhall, which was in England, and I was gone for about 3 to 4 months. And so that 3 to 4 months, I got to work out, but there was no competition. And we were in the middle of a war. So there was, I worked out, ate as well as I could because it's not like we had kitchens. So, we were privy to whatever we were getting fed in the cafeterias. But I remember all things were put on hold at that point because I was TDY.
What's TDY?
TDY means temporary duty. That means they send you on a temporary trip. And that's what, a lot of times when we're in war and we're sending our troops, we're deploying them.
Right.
They're not at their home base. They're now in Afghanistan or somewhere else. And so I remember going through that. And if I would have stayed in the Air Force, that would have happened to me a lot. I would probably be gone for 3 to 6 months at a time. I have clients that are in the Navy. And sometimes they have to go on the boat for 3 months. There's no competition for them. And so if I would have stayed in the Air Force, it would have been very difficult to have the career that I had because I was competing at some point 7 times a year. And they were always not in Washington, always out of state, or international.
Did your peers and colleagues within the military, did they notice a transformation in your body during this time? Like, is it noticeable, or did you just kind of keep it to yourself and you had your clothes on and nobody really knew what was going on?
No, I do think it was noticeable. Number one, I was always shocked that in they call it BDUs, battle dress uniforms, and it's basically the fatigues, the camouflage uniform that the military wear. Even though I think it's baggy, you can still tell when somebody is fit because of how it pulls in on the waistline, how you fill out the shoulders, and you're showing some build in the legs and in the glute area. And so I remember still being shocked when people would meet me in uniform and they'd say, wow, you're really fit. I'm like, how can you tell? I'm not even wearing shorts or a sports bra. And then, of course, there's the base gym where, if everybody at the gym, you'll see your soldiers and you'll see your leadership. Everybody goes to the gym out there. And so we'd see each other and then they'll know, like, wow, our LT is in really great shape. They see me lifting weights. And so I don't think it was anything that was hidden. It wasn't anything that I exploited, but it just wasn't hidden.
Right.
And I don't think that my body, I was never overweight, ever. I actually now, being retired at 45, I'm carrying more body fat than I've ever carried in my life. So I think that my body was always in great shape. And then I just, over the years, got leaner and leaner and more muscular and more muscular. So like in college, I think that when I went to my 20-year reunion and people saw how much more muscular I got, that was really interesting. But for the most part, it was always a subtle progression of just being in shape and getting in better shape and better shape and better shape.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a little anecdote here. I went to an event. It was in New York. It was probably it could have been as long as 10 years ago. And it was, I was being hosted with American Express just as like this PR thing. And there was maybe a group of 10 of us at this dinner. And I remember sitting across from me was this woman in a sleeveless dress. And she was very poised and just had these beautiful shoulders, like very cut.
And chest.
Yes. And I just thought, oh my God, how does that happen? Like, how does somebody get like that? It totally flabbergasted me. Well, then fast forward probably 4 or 5 years, and I started doing P90X. I don't know if you know
Yes.
the P90X. So I did P90X for a year solid, and I was like, oh, I get it.
It's coming.
But I understand that it's just daily work. That
Right.
There's like no magic to
Right.
it. But I just could not fathom how this woman had like these great shoulders and like just these great arms and like a Michelle Obama arms, right? And I just did not get how that happened. And also like if I would just pass people on the street, guys in particular, and I would just see just kind of, I always see it kind of in their necks.
And traps.
Yeah, and I just think, like, oh, military. That's always my first thought is like, for some reason, guys in military are like always have like, their traps and their necks are just like, you can just tell. And it's like, no, not necessarily. It's just people who work out.
Right.
But I was never exposed to that.
Right.
So I never got that. Now, now I'm like, oh, now I understand now.
And that's the beauty of weight training. So when people don't have experience with weight training, it's really amazing what consistent weight training. Let's say if I took anyone and had them weight train 3 to 4 times a week for a year, their body would look totally different. You would see that definition on their arms and their butt would start to shape. And, they even lose body fat in doing it. So it's magic.
Yeah, it is. And it doesn't take as much as people think. It's just, it's consistency with it. That's it. But so let's talk about the competitions. And so you decided to leave the military and then go into bodybuilding and fitness full time. What is that world like? Like, what is your experience of that world? Because I can't, it's just like me looking across the room at this woman, right? At the American Express dinner and going, how does somebody do that? I look at the photos of you and I think, oh my God, how does one even get to that? Like, so what does your typical day look like? And what does that world look like?
I would say, the bodybuilding world has multi-dimensions, right? So in one sense, it really attracts perfectionists and high performers, people who are very goal-oriented and they're constantly pursuing excellence. So in that sense, it can be very addicting. And it's great for people who are structured and are disciplined. Others who are not, it's a struggle for them, but I've seen a lot of people have victory over changing their lifestyle and gaining some of those strengths where they become more disciplined and they learn how to be structured and routine. But it typically is super great. Like, it's great for my husband because he is an extremely routine individual. So he's irritated if he doesn't get his morning gym time, and he's always taking food to work.
And he doesn't have a military background.
No. And he has just always been into fitness. And so that's one dimension of it. And then there's the dimension that I feel like from a health perspective, like personally, you got to be careful with it because it's somewhat of a vain industry in the sense that what you are trying to work on is your personal body and you're trying to get it to look a certain way. And then you become obsessed with making it look a certain way. And so you could be at this level of fitness and beauty and aesthetics, but you're feeling negative because you could be here, but you're here. Now, the average person, I want you to picture, is like 10 feet below that. And then this person that's here is still not content. And so, we call that body dysmorphia sometimes, where very fit people are calling themselves fat or that they don't look good. And the average person is saying, like, are you kidding me? Like, really?
Because there's always room for improvement.
Yes, right? Yes. And I think, too, just like in the modeling industry or with celebrities, there's going to be a little bit of that societal peer pressure as far as what is the definition of beauty and femininity. And I know my personal battle within the first 5 years of competing. So I went from being in the military, and probably the most feminine thing I did was be a cheerleader, right? But I still felt extremely feminine and beautiful and special in that world. And then I go into the bodybuilding industry, and now I'm missing something that I'm noticing a lot of the other women have, and that was breast augmentation. So that was kind of that era where breast augmentation was becoming super popular, and it was so popular in the bodybuilding industry because women, when they compete, they get very lean and they lose their breast tissue. So if you were a size C for breasts, you would probably compete, and if you competed at double digits for your body fat or single digits, you might go from a C to a B minus or even an A. And so when you're thinking about that pursuit of excellence and perfection, well, what is perfection when you look at muscle and femininity?
So when you say they had augmentation, are you saying that they augmented to have larger breasts?
Larger breasts, yes.
Okay, because they had already lost it and now they wanted to gain it again.
Or like me, they just never had it. Like I've always been a size A. And now that my body fat is higher, I might be a B. I'm just blown away. I'm like really liking this, And so I think just they had a vision of, and because we're wearing bikinis, and so there became a vision for what the best was. And the best is the roundest, most perkiest butt you can think of, the tiniest waist that you can envision, and then boobs that are maybe C or D cups. And so that was becoming a very prevalent look. And here I was, an African-American girl who has muscular legs. My waist was small, but not super tiny. I had broad shoulders, muscular physique, and a flat chest, right? And so I would put on a dress. I'll never forget this. I was at the Olympia competing, and the Olympia for the bodybuilding world is like our Olympics. So it is the most coveted competition. And I'm in the top 10 of the world. And I was dating a guy at the time, and, after I did my competition, we're supposed to put our nice clothes on and go out to watch the Mr. Olympia the very next day. And I was feeling super self-conscious because I'd already been around expos of women that all had fake boobs. And they looked amazing with their tiny waist and six-pack abs and then these big perky boobs. And here I am in the best shape of my life, and I feel like a boy, like flat as a board right here. And I just remember just having anxiety about it and just like not giving myself positive self-talk as I'm getting dressed. And I could tell he's put up with it for a while, and he finally was just basically saying that you are one of the most beautiful women in this whole place, and there are hundreds of women that will kill just to look like you, to have your body, everything about it. And you have all this wonderfulness going on, and you're really sitting here complaining about boobs? He minimized boobs to this such a small thing that it really worked for me. Like it convicted me. And it made me think, oh, what have I done? Where did the Tanji go from 4 years ago with the same small boobs, was being thrown around as a cheerleader, just feeling vibrant and beautiful and sexy, right? So the only thing that changed was my environment and that societal norm. So in the military, you don't...
In that community, right?
Yes, in the community of the military, you don't see tons of women at that time with breast implants, and they're not half naked, showcasing their physique. It was just a totally different environment. Now I'm in an environment where it's all about what you look like. It's all about the body. And it's also a highly sexually exploited industry at times, too. And that affects what you see on magazine covers. And every time you flip a page, like, oh, look at this gorgeous girl. Look at this gorgeous girl. And so I remember, number one, that was the first time I recognized, okay, this is a problem for me. I'm not liking this. I'm not liking what this is doing to how I feel about myself and what it's done to my confidence. And I remember thinking, I could just go get breast implants. But I remember thinking, once I realized what it did to me, I thought, I just don't feel like that's good enough for me. I don't feel like it's good enough for me to just go have a surgery and say, yes, it's okay, world, for you to define what sexy and beautiful is. So I'm going to go and get these boobs to be accepted by you, society. I remember thinking, like, if at some point in my life I felt good enough just the way I was, I want that girl back. That's who I want back. And so I knew for me, that wasn't the answer for me. And I don't have problems with anybody doing it. I just knew for me, I was searching for something deeper, and I was searching for self-acceptance. And I know I needed to evolve to get there.
Do you think that not having the breast augmentation harmed you in any way in terms of your competition? Like, do you think you came in fourth, rather than first or second because of that?
I think that it affected me a little bit in certain marketing opportunities, but as far as a competitor, now maybe if I hadn't stuck around long enough to find out, but I have become an 11-time professional champion. And, I competed for 18 years. So I've actually got a lot of accolades. I've won a lot of competitions, and I did it all without boobs, so I can actually say, no, I do not think it stopped me.
Do you think it helped define the industry in another way?
I do think that it became an inspiration for a lot of women to basically have the freedom to know, if you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to, because there are people who are successful without it. It's kind of like what we talk about, why it's so important for people of color to see people of color, as role models, because if we see a black female pilot, if I see a black, president, then we just know it's possible. Because if we don't, there's always going to be that self-doubt. So I think that for me, it was wonderful to be a pioneer, to be able to inspire other women, like, be you. Get fit, work on your craft, work on your talent, and you don't really have to do anything you don't want to do. Now, when it comes to marketing opportunities, I was sponsored by a few companies, and this one particular supplement company, I noticed never, even though I was their top performing athlete, and I'd been with them for 5 years, they never put me in a magazine spread. And all the other women were blonde, blue eyes, and had big boobs. So at that time, I didn't know, is this an ethnic thing? Or is this I don't have that sex appeal that they're looking for because I have a more track athletic body? And so I remember wondering about that. But I realized that was just that company. because during those 5 years where I was becoming a top level athlete, I was featured, I've had 3 magazine covers, and I've been featured in Flex Magazine's swimsuit issue. And I remember getting the call, do you want to be in our swimsuit issue? I was like, you know I don't have boobs, right?
Did you say that?
Yes, on the phone. I'm like, I mean, in my competitions, I might stuff my, bikini top with a little bit of like those chicken cutlets that give me a little bit of, breast, but I don't really have breasts. So if you make me just wear a plain bikini, it's going to be all pecs up here. And I remember them laughing and saying, yes, Tanji, because we want to showcase all kinds of bodies.
Wow.
And we think that you're beautiful and that you're sexy, and we want to show that, and it doesn't matter. I remember them saying it doesn't matter. And I remember that did a lot for me, for that particular brand, that magazine brand, to basically tell me that it was okay and that it didn't matter. And I think it was just after that, getting featured on magazine covers, it didn't stop me from getting featured in multiple magazines. Now, maybe with that one particular company, they never endorsed me or highlighted me the way I thought they should. So I just walked away from them. And I just kind of realized that maybe as a whole, the industry may look through a certain lens, but it's up to people like me to help change that. And the more that I exist and other people like me, there's going to be those people in the magazines that say, you're great just the way you are. So I think it's something we deal with everywhere. But I just remember going through that struggle. I struggled so much with my femininity when I came into the bodybuilding sport. And that's what has really evolved me into feeling really good about not only just my sexuality, but my femininity, and knowing that it doesn't take away from my strength at all.
So you mentioned supplement company. Take me through like a typical day and a typical day of eating and supplementing and any other things that you have to do to take care of yourself.
Yes. So I would start off in the morning. I usually would start off with fasted cardio, and I would just burn body fat and burn, calories on an empty stomach. And then right afterward, I'd have I would just drink water and do my cardio session. And it just kind of got me moving. So I was burning fat. It energized me. And
30 minutes, 45, 60?
It would range from 30 to 45 most of the time, unless I was really close, like within 2 weeks of a competition. I was just trying to get that last bit of fat off. Then it could be up to an hour. So then I would have probably a half a cup of oatmeal, 6 egg whites at the time, a half a cup of blueberries. I would eat all of that. And my breakfasts and post-workouts have evolved over the years to where I eventually incorporated some Ezekiel bread, or I would do spinach, so maybe no carbs and just spinach and egg whites with, avocados and more fat. So I've done a little bit of the keto and then the balanced diets where you kind of count your macros. But I'd have my breakfast, and then 3 hours would go by. Now, I'd be drinking a gallon to a gallon and a half of water throughout the day, and then I'd eat again. And my next meal might look like, I would say the most typical meal was always 4 ounces of chicken breast with maybe 4 ounces of sweet potato or yam, and then some type of vegetable, broccoli, green beans, and then I would do that meal again, and then maybe I'd go work out and do my gymnastics routine, and then have a green apple right as I'm leaving the gym, and a protein shake that was maybe 200 calories or less. And then I'd get home and I'd have another meal. Usually at night I'd eat maybe sirloin or salmon, and then I'd have a big cup of rice. And it was just that, so I was probably eating 5 times a day, with maybe 1 supplement shake. Now, as far as supplements throughout the day, I would take glutamine, which helps with muscle recovery, probably twice a day at 5 grams, and I would put that in my shake. And then I was always loaded on vitamins and minerals. So vitamin C was a big one for me, vitamin D, B complex. So those are all things and then I was doing magnesium and calcium. So I was always doing that. And I think in the beginning of my career, I was taking some creatine and some supplements that helped with muscle growth. And then after that, it was really maybe a little bit of pre-workout, which is kind of a drink that you drink that has nitric oxide in it that helps with oxygen delivery while you're working out. But to be honest with you, I was just never a very big supplement person. For me, it was always about the basic minerals and vitamins. And the biggest supplement that I loved taking was getting whey protein, because I was always wanting to get more protein versus just trying to eat meat and more protein all the time. But other than that, and then when I'm trying to get lean, I would usually do a fat burner. And so I kind of went through different evolutions of sometimes I wouldn't do fat burners. I would just drink green tea or have caffeine. And then other times I'd find whatever the best fat burner was on the market, and I would take it in the morning and afternoon for 6 weeks. And the combination of me exercising, sleeping well, drinking a gallon of water, eating extremely clean, and being on a calorie deficient diet, meaning maybe I was doing 1,200 or 1,600 or maybe 1,800 at the most, but it was always very structured to how much I was outputting. And then it was like a math equation of, okay, I've got 12 weeks to go. I'm at 18% body fat. I need to be at 11% body fat. This is how much time I have. And then we'd go through the first 2 weeks. And it's like, oh, you lost a percentage of body fat in 2 weeks. Okay, so if we want to accelerate this, we need to add a little bit more cardio, start the fat burners now. So it was a combination of all of those things working together and me being in my 20s and 30s. And it just worked out magically. It was, and I just did it for years and years and years. So it literally became a job for me. It was very routine. I got tired of it towards the end. Towards, my late 30s, it's like, okay, my body's starting to get tired.
Just the routine of the food, you mean?
Everything, everything. Because for me, what's interesting is I grew up in the South, in South Carolina. My dad's Black, my mom's Korean. Korean cuisine is a lot of rice and spicy food. But soul food, like what my dad grew up on, that's like the opposite of health. So
fried chicken.
Oh my gosh, yes,
and ribs and that kind of thing.
And I'm growing up with potato salad and macaroni salad, and it's funny because like my husband sometimes I'm like, we don't ever do it, but I'm like, one of these days I want you to barbecue me ribs, and he's just like, oh, meat off the bone. I'm just like, but you're just. And he's white too. So I'll laugh at him and I'll say, you're not Black if you don't learn how to, cook some ribs, because my mom, even though she was Korean, she learned how to cook Black food. And so our typical breakfast was grits with butter in it, scrambled eggs with
a little
cheese
bacon.
in it.
Did you put a little bacon on
bacon.
it too?
Then there'd be slabs of bacon with sausages. That was like our whole American breakfast growing up.
My family's from the South too, so I grew up on grits with butter and then crumbled bacon in it.
Oh my gosh,
which
that sounds so good.
It does sound really good.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I don't eat that stuff anymore, but it still
and it's funny because
really
my mom always cooked. So fast food for us when we were growing up was a huge deal. Like if we ever got to go to McDonald's, so we didn't grow up eating fast food. So it appealed to me in my 20s. I was like, oh my God, I love McDonald's. And so I feel like my childhood, I got away with it because genetically we were blessed, but it wasn't the picture of health. And both my parents smoked as well, so I got a little bit of that side stream smoke. Then I go to the academy and I'm super active, and of course there's no smoking, no alcohol, and the diet gets a little bit better because I'm eating their cafeteria food. Then I become a bodybuilder, and then it gets really cleaned up, but that didn't take away from how I still enjoy sugar. And then, somewhere in my 20s, I enjoy the taste of alcohol. Alcohol was never a problem where I can always go out and have one glass of wine or a cocktail, but I do want to have it. So when I'm dieting and I can't even have a margarita or a mojito or something, I'm definitely missing out, And so, and the same thing with treats. It's like, I just want a cookie or a piece of cake.
Yeah.
So I felt like when I got tired, I was tired of constantly saying no and depriving myself. So after 20 years of this lifestyle, it's like, I just want the freedom to drink and have a glass of wine with my dinner, and I want to be able to go to Starbucks and get a pastry if I feel like it, or to be able to get something other than Americano every once in a while. So I feel like all of that, and then the hours of working out was making my body tired.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you there. So you had mentioned a little bit of cardio in the morning, maybe some gymnastics at night, but
in the midday,
but I didn't hear about
and then the evening.
The weight training,
and then the weight training was usually in the evening.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would do cardio at 7 or 8 to just liven up my body. And it's funny, you're going to be like, when did you work? I'm like, well, luckily there was definitely a 10-year period of my life where I was doing really well as a competitor that I was able to make good money off of my competitions. So I felt like I was a professional athlete. I wake up and I do cardio, and then I train at noon where my energy was best. That's when I would do the gymnastics because it's kind of like doing a CrossFit workout. And then I'd take a nap, and then 4 hours later I'd go to the gym and lift weights, which wasn't as strenuous, even though it's a different type of strenuous. It's lifting weights, but it's not doing flips and the endurance. And then if I needed to at the very end of the night, I would do a session of cardio right after my lifting. So that's where the 3 hours a day came from. And I would do that 5 days a week. And one day might have one workout and then one full day of rest. And I did that for years and years and years, and it was just a routine. And I was lucky enough that because I started my own business with the posing and the personal training, all that would be my priority. And then in between, I would have clients,
So in the bodybuilding and fitness world, are there banned substances?
Absolutely.
And do you still see a rampant use of them?
So I would say it depends on the division and it depends on the organization. So there actually are all natural organizations where you have to be drug tested or you take a polygraph. And so that organization will attract very natural athletes. And then there's also what is natural. Some people will say if you take a fat burner or something with caffeine, that's not natural. And then other people will say, oh no, anabolic steroids that are banned, across the board, though that's not being natural. So I think it also looks at how you define. Now, in my sport, the professional bodybuilders like the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and the Ronnie Colemans and, the Mr. Olympias, I think everybody knows that those guys are not natural. You're not going to get that big without some help. So it's very prevalent in the men's bodybuilding world. And I would say it's just more prevalent in general with the men. And unfortunately, when I say unfortunately, because I have a personal belief that I just like to see people reach their maximum potential before they choose to do any other enhancements, right? And so I don't like it when I hear about an amateur athlete who just started competing a year ago, getting on a cycle because they want to rush and get those results. I kind of feel like, I know you don't want to wait, but spend the 3 to 4 years, eat the protein, do the workouts, get sleep, manage your stress, and just see what your body evolves to. And then if you're not satisfied, and, for me too, it's like there's always risk with that stuff. So it's like, I don't know if I'd want to take that risk unless you were trying to be like the best in the world.
Sure,
and it
absolutely.
was, a career like a lot of the professional sports. If it's just for aesthetics, that's just not me to do that. So, but I do think it's more prevalent with the guys. Now, when it comes to the women, there are performance enhancing agents that can help you get leaner. And so that's what I see a lot of the women doing, not necessarily the muscle growth stuff, because the level of muscularity you need to have as a woman in our divisions today, you can achieve that. I mean, that's what's so crazy. Now the industry has evolved so much that our world is not just bodybuilding. There's all these divisions I could spit out: figure, bikini, women's physique, wellness. These are all different women's physique bodies, but they look a little bit different. Some are not a lot of muscle, a little bit more muscle, a little bit more muscle, and then fitness, which is what I did, is good amount of muscle and athletic performance. Where a bikini is going to be your typical very petite, bone-structured woman. Actually, you have the body type that could do bikini as far as like you're slender and you could put on muscle tone, but you may not be super huge in muscularity, And then, with bikini, they really need to have great glutes. And not everyone has great glutes. So if you do squats and you work your legs, your butt can build up. But some of that is kind of genetic. I'm working with 20-year-olds that are turning pro in 2 years, where I felt like, for what I did, it took years. As a bodybuilder, it takes 10 years. And so nowadays, women are achieving professional status in a year or two. And so, because it's achievable, which has been great for our industry because it's made our industry more mainstream. So, I have different feelings about that. Our industry is more mainstream. So as a promoter and a business owner and it's a
good
great
thing, right?
It's great for me. But I feel like we're losing.
The authenticity of it, the old school way of it.
It's not as hard. It's now everybody can do it. It's super attainable. Where before, when you saw a bodybuilder, like you felt like, when you see someone, you're just like, that is unbelievable. It's like seeing someone knowing someone who can do the Boston Marathon. You're like, you are so fast, And so we've lost a little bit of that. But in the women's world, I don't feel like it's as prevalent. And in maybe what's more prevalent on the professional level is women, taking stuff to get leaner faster.
I don't want to skip over this topic because we chatted about it, and I think the community and listeners would be really delighted to hear kind of this aspect of it. But you've done a fair bit of traveling in your lifetime, and a lot of that has been solo, just on your own. How did that all develop? Like, how did you start traveling, and what was you loved it. I know from our previous conversation that you really enjoyed it. So can you just describe how you started traveling and how that all developed for you?
It came about when I was competing professionally. So a couple of things were happening. Not only was I doing competitions that were in different countries and other states, but as a professional, I would get hired to be a guest performer or a judge. And so maybe somebody out of Michigan would say, oh, we want to, pay you $2,000 and have you come do your routine for our bodybuilding show. And then a month later, they want you to come to New York. And then Bahamas wants you to come. Yay, oh my gosh, say yes, say yes.
Yes.
And so all of that was happening. And as you know, when you travel and you get outside of your world and you see the world or see the rest of the country, it doesn't maybe have that impact on everybody, but for me, it's very awe-inspiring. And my eyes are open, my perspective grows, and I just come back a better person. I feel like instead of things being limited and small, everything's a possibility, right? And so I love that effect that traveling had on me. And so ironically, I probably wanted to retire. I retired in 2016, but I probably wanted to retire in 2014 and 15. But at that time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a huge brand in the bodybuilding industry, had these competitions, and every year he kept having them in additional countries. So I kept sticking around because I thought, well, if I stick around so in 1 year, I remember going to Australia in March, and then I went to Brazil in April, and then I went to Africa, and then Hong Kong.
And this was all for competitions?
Yes,
oh,
in 1 year. In 1 year. And then I went to Spain, and then Vegas. And I remember just hitting all those countries for the first time, and it was paid for. My travel, my lodging, all that was paid for, and I had the potential to make prize money if I placed in the top 5. And so to me, that was the best part of the end of my career, was being able to do that. And what led me to traveling alone was, so probably in my late 20s, I was making enough money that I could afford to go to vacation. And after going to some of these cool cities and flying to Barbados and Bermuda and stuff, I remember thinking, well, I want to keep doing that. I don't want to wait until somebody hires me to do it. But at the time, I had a lot of friends and family that were working 9-to-5 jobs, and so they couldn't take off spontaneously without planning for it well in advance. They either didn't want to take the time off, or they didn't have the finances to buy a last-minute ticket, where for me, things were more spontaneous. When I say spontaneous, I mean within a month. Oh, you know what? Next month, I think I want to go to Cabo. It's like, oh, it's about to be December here. I think I want the first week of December, I just want to go to Cabo for like 5 days. And so I remember, and, even though I've had relationships, I remained single, unmarried until my 40s. And even though I had, boyfriends and relationships sprinkled in, a lot of times I was single. My lifestyle, just what my commitment was, traveling a lot. I was single a lot. And I remember being disappointed that, I don't have somebody to take. And then I can't get a friend to come because they just can't make it happen. So what do? Do I just not go? And I remember saying, no, just go. And I also knew that what I was doing with my career, the coaching, and I led large groups of women. So I was always teaching these classes where I was just pouring into people, masses of people, that when I actually thought about escaping to a nice resort in Mexico to read a book, lay out by the pool, and just kind of have some quiet time, that appealed to me. And initially, there may have been a little bit of anxiety, like when I went to Europe and I did Italy for the first time, like, am I going to be able to get around? What about the language? And, I don't live in New York. I don't take subways and trains and things like that. And I just remember thinking, buy all the little language books, and you'll figure it out,
right.
And I started off by making sure I just stayed in safe places, which is what I call resorts, and then, when I started going to Italy, then I'd venture out, and instead of staying in the fancy hotels, sometimes I would just do a little villa or stay in an apartment in the middle of the city. And the more, when you get experience doing something, then
you just
confidence.
you start to branch out then. Yeah. So you really enjoyed that.
I did, because probably the most special thing that I discovered was how comfortable I was being with myself. It's like getting to know someone and becoming their best friend, but that person is you, right? So you really, when there's not a lot of noise, like there's not a noise from spouse or your best friend or your clients or work, you actually get to sit there and just be with yourself. So I would sit at dinner with myself, and I would pay attention to my thoughts and just realize, I would talk about what I was seeing, the beauty, like how you felt when you came to my home. That's how I would be at every resort. I would just be in all of the beauty, the water. I would pay attention to the people around me. I love the language, the hospitality, all of these things that now are a part of who I am. There's a reason why like my sister said to me before she left, you have a certain level of hospitality that is your standard, and it's different for everybody. But I've been to some really beautiful places and I like the way they treat me, the way they talk to me. And so it's an extension of who I want to become. Like, well, I can give that. I've learned it. I've seen it. I can give that. Beauty. I'm inspired to make this place even more beautiful because I've seen beautiful landscaping and water and trees. And so, like, we went to the Japanese garden in Seattle and I was thinking, like, man, seeing the root of trees is such an experience than if you don't see the trunk and the root of a tree, right? And so that's what made me want to prune and trim all my trees up so I could see the base of it. It's just a different look. And so for me, it just made me get to know myself better. It made me love myself, appreciate myself, respect myself. And I just think that made me a stronger individual when I planted myself in a community. So it was needed. I think it was much needed.
I think like hearing you talk about that description of traveling, and I know it wasn't that many years ago, but I think the problem today is people don't have that same kind of appreciation because they're never really by themselves. Because even if you take a trip on your own, you feel confident enough to take a trip on your own, you're still looking at the New York Times or you're reading your local blog or the local newspaper from your city to keep up with things, or you're on Facebook and you're keeping in touch with people so closely that you never have that time to really appreciate your surroundings, the culture, the food, because you're always taken away somewhere else. And that's really, I think there's the generation and the generations to come. That's really sad. As a person who's been traveling for 30 years, I see that as such a great loss, and I find myself gravitating that way too. I try to cut it off as much as I can, but there's nothing better than going someplace where there's no cell connection, and no Wi-Fi, and you really are cut off and you have to just be there, be focused. That's such a great lesson, something that we should pursue more. But great. Do you have travel plans when things open up again?
Well, our next travel plan is to go to Spain, to Alicante, which is like a little, kind of like it's on the coast, but, my husband and I are going to try our second round of IVF. And internationally, there's some great opportunity there where you can do it at a quarter of the cost.
No kidding.
Yes. So it's unbelievable. Like, we did one round at Seattle Reproductive, and then I found out from a friend who has a friend, and, they had success. I mean, Africa does it, Spain does it. I mean, we're not talking about third world countries. We're talking about countries that have these amazing medical institutes, and the way they can get away with it is they're not a for-profit company.
Yeah, and not get away with it. Like, I don't want people to think that like they're going under the radar or trying to get away with something, but it's that, because I'm all for medical tourism. I'm a big advocate for it. And it's just that it's just a different infrastructure, and in some cases it is developing countries, but they have like in Bangkok, there's like the best hospital in all of Asia is in Bangkok. And it's the same thing. It's a 10th or a fifth of the cost to get something done elsewhere.
Because it's motivated by research. And they're developing. And so for me, it doesn't appeal to my husband because he's afraid of flying, but he's been extremely brave many times with me. And for him, he thinks more about that might be 10 days away from work. And as a chiropractor, when you don't work, the office is shut down. So I get all that. For me, what appeals to me most, because since we've been married, it's been a while since we've traveled or gone anywhere extravagant. I just can't wait to experience Europe again. And then if it can be fueled by something that's going to change our life, to me, that just is going to make everything really special.
When were you planning to go?
Oh, we were supposed to go in January. And then, when you're looking at your fertility, they're constantly reevaluating your body. So for me, fibroids have come up every once in a while. So at the time they thought they saw one and we needed to wait. And so then we were supposed to go in April, and then COVID happened. And so then, when I thought we were going to be okay, time to get the medication, needed to get the medication from Canada. And then that took 3 months. Just to get it. So then we, my husband will hate me for saying this, but then, we realized that his passport expired. So now we're in the process of waiting for that.
But you can't go to
right
Europe
now.
anyway.
Right now. And then that just happened about a month ago. And so everything's kind of on hold. And so he just asked me a couple of nights ago, So what do you think? And I said, right now, I'm not willing to give up. I want to see what happens as far as Americans traveling to Europe in the next 3 to 4 months.
Right. Could
because
be.
as soon as they open the door, like we're pretty much ready. All I got to do, I have my medication. I'm just ready to get on the cycle for 1 month and then get over there and do it. But if by the end of the year, we're still closed off, we have to look at doing it here in America and just spending more money, which
Sure.
just drives me crazy. But at some point, we've just got to move forward. And that's what is hardest for everybody with all of their plans. So for us, it's fertility. For somebody else, it's an athletic career or competition. Other people, it's business. But you're sitting here, we're all waiting.
Right.
We're waiting to pass through this season.
It's the unknown, yeah.
And even with my clients, I've had to tell them, to get some sense of normalcy and control back, even if the competition doesn't happen, continue to work out, continue to eat well, continue to invest in posing, because at least you're still preparing and it'll at least make you feel like you've taken some of your life back. And so for us, we may have to just spend more money and say, we're going to do it in the U.S. It's not what we were planning to do, but we're moving forward because we're just not willing to be a victim to waiting till life gets better or things open up for us to be able to do what we want to do.
Well, can you get some sort of a special pass to get into the country for
We
for
probably
medical
would
reason?
need to research that.
Because it strikes me that might be an option. And then I don't know if Mexico is an option, but I know people who have been going to Mexico. So it's possible to get into Mexico right now, at least.
And that's what we'd probably have to do is research what countries are okay, because there's a top 10 list of top 10 best fertility clinics outside of the U.S. And Spain was number 2. And I think Greece was number 1 and Africa was in the top 5. So it's really just a matter of, okay, I may just have to start over with another, company, which I'd hate to do, but, that's my...
Right, if it's going to get you in, into the country, then, yeah. Well, good luck with that. That's a big undertaking.
Thank you.
Sorry you're having to go through that. Is there anything that... We talked about a lot of different things. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to touch upon or that I should have asked you?
The only other thing that's been on my heart because of the climate of where we're at is just, COVID happened. Well, it's funny. I think Kobe Bryant died. That was just a crazy phenomenon. You think about how crazy this year. He dies, COVID happens, Black Lives Matter happen, the election's about to happen. And there's just all these polarizing, the Kobe thing wasn't polarizing, but there's all these polarizing things that keep happening. And now I feel like aliens are going to come next and we're just going to all be debating on whether they're real or not. But I think I want to touch on that and what it's been like for me, because when you're in a situation where you're looking at the world and it hurts you to see so much division, whether it's over politics or social climate or a pandemic, right? We're left to figure out how do we coexist and maintain peace in our hearts, right? I don't know if you've been through any of it, but I know there are people who are just, like with the mask, right? They're just on one side and just super angry and feeling violated. And then on the other side, they're just appalled that people don't care more. And so, there's a lot of anger there. There's all that energy, where people are afraid to exist. Like, where am I supposed to be? And then with politics, we're about to go through it again. And back in the day, you couldn't even talk about Trump or Hillary without being on a side and being afraid to get shot up. And then with what's going on in our social climate, it's like, is there white privilege? Do Black Lives Matter? What does all that mean? And so I found myself, especially through the social climate, just, having those days where I'm just angry or hurt or extremely disappointed. Like I saw a client of mine. It was funny because I did post a hashtag Black Lives Matter, and I invited 10 of my friends to post it as well. It was one of those type of things. And I noticed that one friend didn't post it, and I thought education was very important, so I was one of those people who wanted to post respectfully educational content, whether it was about systemic racism or about these different concepts. And I noticed that this individual didn't like any of that either. And so then, I go to her page, and she's been quiet. She hasn't said anything about the issues. And then I go to a political activist who is very popular right now that I don't really love. And I went to her social media page, and you can always see when you're friends like that person. So that client was liking all of her stuff. And it just tore me up. Like it was the whole, I feel like I don't even know this person. I didn't know she kind of thought that way. I didn't know that she wouldn't be supportive, all of this stuff. And I felt a certain way about it. And I remember just the negativity I was filled with and how hurtful it was to me. And then I had to go through this process of stepping back and just acknowledging, okay, I still think she's a great person. I know this person. I still think she's a great person. Obviously, we don't see eye to eye. And how do I make that okay? How do I make that okay? And I feel like our world, we're in that right now. How do I coexist with people that we're just going to disagree, and we disagree about the mask issue, and we're going to be okay. And we disagree about who should become president, and that's okay. And we disagree about how we see what the social clip. There is a problem. There isn't a problem. There is a problem. There isn't a problem. How do we make ourselves okay?
Is this person, is he or she white?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I found myself, and I'm glad I went through this, because now I am in a better place of peace. Because if I can't be positively contributing to this world, then I feel like, what good am I, right? So we all can be reactive, and we can all be affected. And so that was definitely happening. And then I thought, what is the best thing I can do here? So a lot of it was just adjusting my mindset to being more accepting and to give people the same respect and grace and acceptance that I would want for whatever my beliefs are. Like if I say that Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that all lives don't matter, I really want people to try to understand that it's just an issue that's being highlighted, and it's not a disrespect or denouncing of anything else. And I want people to really listen, and I want them to understand, possibly embrace, but ultimately accept whether they agree or not, right? So my end goal is they hear that and they don't get offended, right? And then my goal is I want to hear all lives matter and not get so upset, which it used to upset me a lot.
Well, what's interesting is that I try not to get really pulled into issues, and I'm not listening to a lot of opinion pieces or reading a lot of opinion pieces. So sometimes I don't fully understand something. And so I was running in my neighborhood, and, I see the Black Lives Matter, and I thought all lives matter. Mm-hmm. But when I thought it, to me, it was like, I'm a traveler. Mm-hmm. To me, it's like Asian lives matter. Yeah. African lives matter. It's like, Norwegian lives matter. To me, it meant that all-encompassing thing. And then I think right when I was having that on my thought, there was a woman who got in trouble who was, I'm not sure that she cared that Black Lives Matter, but she was like, well, all lives matter. And then it became this thing because she did not mean it in the kindest way. I meant it in a more kind way, And then I was like, oh, I see. So now if you say all lives matter, I'm like, I have to keep my mouth shut. It's like, because if you say all lives matter, then it means that Black lives don't matter. And then I realized, I'm like, okay, well, this is a movement. Just that is a movement that signifies something that is bigger, right? That is bigger, and it really does mean that people of all colors, and now it's the BIPOC thing, right? So, and for people who don't know what BIPOC is, because I had to look it up, it's Black, Indigenous, people of color. So it's the whole thing. But I understand that BLM really means it's a much broader
and
thing.
It's meant to highlight. I try to help people understand by saying, when you see the pink ribbon and you see people promoting breast cancer awareness, how many people do you know immediately when they hear someone say breast cancer awareness, do they say, but prostate cancer is important? Nobody does that. But why? Why do they not do that, right? When Boston had the bombing, there was a specific tragedy that happened, and they were Boston strong. South Carolina didn't say, whoa, South Carolina strong too, U.S. strong. Right. We're U.S. strong. Nobody does that. Right. But so that is why it causes so much emotional damage when people are saying, we're saying Black Lives Matter, not because all lives don't matter, but we feel that there is this unequivocal disbalance in what's happening to, there's a fear against Black people. And so they're in these situations where a lot of white people can get away with it, but a lot of times Black people end up getting shot, instantly. And I've watched video after video of, like,
Yeah,
let's say a white person
absolutely.
acting crazy, white person has a gun, and everybody's being really careful with this person. And then a black person, you think they have a gun, you get shot in your car for just, so I definitely think there's a fear there. So that's what Black Lives Matters means, is that we feel like there's a fear or racism going on that makes people value this less. And it's kind of like with breast cancer. It's like, look, a lot of people are dying from breast cancer. Yes, people are dying from but can we just have a week where we just talk about breast cancer?
Right.
So we can get women to take mammograms, so we can get all this to happen, to just focus on this disease. And it has nothing to do with other diseases not existing. And so with Black Lives Matter, every time we hear someone say all lives matter, it's like they're saying, I hear what you're saying, that you think that there's basically, we don't want to say there's any police difference. We don't want to say that people aren't naturally more afraid of black people than they are of white people, blah, blah. None of that exists. So all lives matter. Because when they're saying Black Lives Matter, these are all the different things they're talking about. Like my best friend is white, right? And so I asked her, because she's got 2 kids, and I said, I'll give you 2 examples that I think are amazing. I asked her, do you sit down with your kids and tell them the dangers of being pulled over by police? And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, black families do. So when we say Black Lives Matter, if all lives matter, why wouldn't all parents be having the put your hands on the steering wheel conversation? So I was watching a video, you may have seen it trending, uncomfortable conversations with a black man, a manual, where he interviews this white family. It's a husband and wife couple from Austin, Texas. And he noticed that they have 4 kids, and 1 is white and 3 are black. And so he had them on the show, and it's like, what's up with that? What's going on? And she said, this is my family. And she said, we had our son, Cam, and then we decided to adopt. We went to an agency and we said, where's your greatest need? And they said, well, our greatest need right now is with African-American boys. And she was like, okay, well, we'll adopt a African-American boy. And then they ended up adopting a black girl later, and then a boy who's half black, half white. And this white woman, said that prior to her having black kids, she never worried about her children. And that right now like when it comes to police and being out, she told her black son that you can never go anywhere without your white brother. You can't be alone. And she said, I didn't even understand that fear as a white woman. I only understood it until I became a mother of black children. So these are all the issues that people think of. And so a lot of times when people say all lives matter, yes, they're highlighting something we all agree on. But in doing that, the danger is that it's going to be perceived that they're saying that everything that you're saying, that you're trying to highlight, I don't want to validate and I don't want to acknowledge. Mm-hmm. And that's what it would feel like if it was breast cancer awareness and everybody kept screaming, no, let's make it all cancer or awareness. And then you're like, I'm losing my platform to motivate women to get mammograms right now, or Boston, or like you're minimizing the fact that we just had a bomb in Boston. And it's like, oh no, all countries are strong. All countries have, cities have terrorists attack. I like that we can have this conversation, because if it leaves you with a little bit of, oh, I meant it in the best way, but I can see the harm it does emotionally to people when it's said. Right. Because it's basically not validating what you're trying to say, which shows that I'm not listening. Right. There's a lot of that going on, people not listening. So what I've done is now I've tried to be a better listener. So now that I've listened to all the good intent behind all lives matter, I don't get as angry when I hear people say it, because for the most part, I kind of understand that it can come from a lot of different places. So if I listen to you and you listen to me and we have mutual respect and we don't get angry and we are not so quick to offend, then we can just be open and we can share different perspectives and experiences and viewpoints. Even my husband is white. And, I've been blessed. So I have the privilege of being college educated. I have the privilege of having been a fitness celebrity. I'm the privilege of being an athlete, privilege of being business owners, and financially okay. We have those privileges. So because of that, life has been pretty good for me. Now, that doesn't mean that things don't ever happen. So when they do happen, I think for my husband, because it never happens to him, it's hard for him to recognize. There was a time where we were looking for a townhouse in Ellensburg, kind of in the country, and I was emailing with this woman, and then I talked to her on the phone, and all she knew about us is that I was a fitness instructor and that my husband was a chiropractor and that we were just a thriving couple that didn't have immediate kids or pets. And she was just like, you guys sound like the best couple. I just can't wait to have you guys come in. Maybe I can talk to my husband and see if he'll just skip the whole open house and just let you guys be the renters. She was super jazzed about us. Well, then when we got off the phone, I said, and if you want to learn more about me, here's my website. So I gave her my website. And so I don't know if it was me being black or me being a bodybuilder, but she completely blew me off after that. For weeks, I kept checking in with her like, have you talked to your husband? Did you guys make a decision? Oh, we're still thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, can you let me know if you have an open house? I will. Just never heard back from her. And then after 2 weeks, I told my husband, send her an email as a separate person and just see what happens. And the woman wrote him back immediately and say, oh, yes, come. We have an open house scheduled tomorrow. This will be our second open house. We're still looking for a tenant. And I just, in that moment, I just knew what it was for me. And my husband didn't see it. He said, well, I don't think that has anything to do with race. I'm like, really? So then tell me why. She treated me with such enthusiasm, then all of a sudden didn't, and has been lying to me saying that there's been no open house. And now she's telling you, inviting you. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not one to quickly call the race card, but that's what it feels like to me.
Right.
And so for him and I to argue about it and for me to be frustrated that I don't know how he can't see it. And then later understand that the reason why he didn't see it is, number one, he didn't want to believe that it could be happen. He can't relate because he's not that way. He doesn't think that way and he doesn't discriminate, And for us to realize, to just kind of walk through that journey of, you've grown up a certain way. I've had different experiences. There's a lot we have in common and there's a lot that's different. And let's see if we can expose ourselves to that so that we can grow together.
Thank you so much for explaining that, telling that story. It's almost hard for me to believe that continues to happen today. I mean, you hear stories, but here's a firsthand story of it. And I'm really sorry that continues to be an issue. It's crazy. I have two nieces who are married to people of color and they have kids.
Yeah.
And I worry about my nephew-in-laws.
Yeah.
I worry about my great nephews. It's like, it's very visceral for me because it's in the blood. It's literally part of the family, for me as well. And not that it wasn't a concern before. I don't want people to get that idea, but I don't think people realize that it's that how close it does touch me as well. And it's just, I can't imagine. Of course, just like your husband, you can't imagine because it's not part of my life. It's not something, it's not the thinking that I go to. So it's hard for me to believe that it's out there,
Right.
But there's a lot of things that have happened in the last 3.5 years that I can't believe that are out there because, and we're dealing with it all the time. And I'm constantly shocked,
So that's why, for me, in this period of time, it was important for me to figure out a way to accept the opinion and the mindsets of people I know and care about, and to be gracious with them so that we can have positive dialogue, and it's really not even about agreeing, but it's about the ability to just accept that people have had a different experience and that's shaped their belief systems over time. That might change and it might not, but kind of understand where it comes from and to take it less personally so that I can basically be less affected in a negative way. Because for a while there, I just felt like I was upset for a month, just every time. And that's the other thing that moving here did is we got so caught up in getting settled, tons of yard work to do. I'm just so in awe of this. This is what I choose now. I choose to take a walk. I choose to look at the deer. I choose to work in the garden. I'm not as much choosing to engage on social media and to listen to everybody's opinions because all that was having a negative impact on me. Now, I don't want to be aloof and not know what's going on. So I
there's a fine line in there, isn't there?
So there's like times where I'm going to say, I'm going to watch the news and I'm going to catch up on what's going on with COVID. I'm going to find out what the governor's saying. You do that intentionally. And there almost needs to be for me like this meditation or prayer to prepare my mindset to take in this information that a lot of might be negative. And then figure out, okay, how do I apply it? So for me, with my husband, 4 years ago at the election, we were on two different sides. And that was when we were engaged. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if we're going to make it. And then I thought, I am not going to let these politicians ruin my marriage. And so we just had to learn how to embrace like, okay, I feel this way because this is what I've seen, this is what I've lived. You care about what's impacting business and insurance, and that's why you are going to support this person, whether you like the person or not. And it just kind of helped us get to a place of acceptance. And so now we can talk about it. We may tease sometimes, but, we can talk about it. And even though we're kind of like here now where we were here, right? And so I think that's what's happened with us too. Like he was very open to reading a book with me called White Fragility that's written by Robin DiAngelo. And it's basically covering just, like words like, so for me, all lives matter might be a trigger word. And then for you or for a white person, hearing the word white privilege, just like, and I heard someone say that. She says, every time I hear the term white privilege, that's like calling you the N-word. Like, that's how it makes me feel.
Oh, wow. Some
people feel that way about that term. And a lot of it is because, as I've talked to people, they're just like, how dare you guys just treat me like I'm, I have a better life and, I haven't struggled. And then that's when we have to have the conversation that actually that term is not about you never struggling or having a hard life. It just has to do with your color not being the reason why. That's all it is. That's all it is. Like, having this conversation with your kids, and this family does. That's the privilege, right? I have an educational privilege. I've been a celebrity privilege, right? And so I don't deny that. It's like, it is what it is. I went to college, or I did this, or we live in this beautiful house. We have this privilege of having this sanctuary. I did not have this privilege literally just 2 months ago when we lived in a cooped up townhouse next to the woods, right? So to me, it's like, but there's guilt associated with that, with privileges. And people personally need to work that out. Like if I was white, I would say, so I'm white and that's just not something I have to deal with. Like I was always fit. I never had to deal with being discriminated against for being out of shape. I've always considered myself to be attractive, and I've always been treated as a woman, as an attractive woman. I don't even know what it's like to not be an attractive woman, but I know people who are like, I don't know what that's like. I don't know that privilege where, guys, give you a bigger tip, or, police officer lets you go or whatever. And that's just a very real thing. And I don't need to feel guilty about it. It just is. But it is good to understand it so that I can respect if someone else has not had that experience and how that has impacted them. If you're the fat girl in class, what kind of childhood did you have? Did you get teased? And so for me to act like there's no privilege in the fact that I was skinny in high school, then what does that say to her experience? And so I think that that's a lot of what's going on. And people are so angry that they can't even get to the meat and potatoes of that because they're just too busy not wanting to be a bad person. And so I think in a lot of ways, that's what's helped me evolve in how I talk to my husband, how I engage with my friends. I have my best friend who's white. We kind of got into it a couple years ago because we were talking about another person that got shot. And, we were just on two different sides of believing there was an issue. And she had never really talked about race, so she got so upset that she almost forbade me. She at the time in an email said, we can never do that again. And I said, wait, we can never talk about race? Like, what? Like, okay, I don't think we're going to be able to stay tight and be good friends but that's what white fragility is. Like, we came to understand that she's just never been uncomfortable. She's never had to talk about race. And then talking about race because she felt a certain way about it made her super uncomfortable. And now we're at a place where we can totally talk about it. And I'm glad that we didn't just give up and ditch the friendship because, we butted heads. It's like we grew and realized, like, this is something you've never really had to deal with. I deal with it, on occasion. Now we're trying to talk about it, but we've had different experiences. So there's probably going to need to be some understanding and some acceptance. And we were able to do that. And I feel like that's only what happens when people care about each other enough to give each other that time of day.
Yeah. So that's why. And social media and everything just creates a layer where we don't. It's a bunch
of strangers. They read something and then they give their opinion, and it's this big old fight. And that's what I won't. That's what I won't engage with. That's what I won't engage with. But it has helped me recognize how to communicate with the people that I do care about. Because no matter what, I don't care if you're right or you're wrong, we still need to respect each other for our mindsets and where we've come from. It comes from somewhere. And I'm one of those people, I do inherently believe that people are good. I do. I'll give you one last example because it's kind of the most rich that I can think of. But my husband, he's got the 3 kids, right? So I have 3 stepsons. So their stepmom is black. but they're only with me 12% of the time. The other 90% of the time, they live in Colville, Washington, which is predominantly white and maybe has, 1% blacks, right? And so when I ask my stepsons, do they have any black kids in their school? They're like, maybe 2. In the whole school? Oh, wow. Okay, so not super diverse. So he's telling us a story that his stepdad told them about when he went to Spokane, went to a barbershop, and these Mexican gangsters came in. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. I was like, well, how'd you know they were gangster? Oh, you could tell. Oh, that's what your stepdad said? So instead of just saying that these guys came in that looked like, I was like, what does a gangster look like? Oh, baggy pants and tattoos. And I'm like, there it is. My stepkids are 7, 9, and 12 years old, and they're already being taught by their stepdad the stereotyping of the way a clothes fits on you and a tattoo. And then why did you even say Mexican? So do we hear people say that white gangster, that white, do we even hear people say white American? No, we say Black American, Asian American, Hispanic American, but nobody says white American. So it's built into our society that white is normal and everything else is not. And so we had a conversation with our kids we had to teach them about stereotyping and how damaging that can be if it starts off, if you just get in the habit of doing it.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
And just trying to retrain them to say, it would be more appropriate to say, we saw these guys come in, they were dressed similar to gangsters. Now, I don't expect a 6-year-old to talk like that, but I just want them to be aware of, don't be so quick to throw out
make
the
a judgment.
Race,
mm-hmm.
especially when you're doing it with a negative connotation. And even you have to be careful too, like when we say black president and there was this black athlete, it's like even when you do it to highlight something good, sometimes it leaves the feeling of, oh, that's so unusual that we have to highlight the race. Instead of oh, I worked with this amazing lawyer. I worked with this amazing black lawyer. That's such a unique thing. And then how does that make black people feel like we're inferior and that it's so unbelievable if we actually accomplish something like that? So there's all those microaggressions that go on that people aren't even aware of,
right.
And so when people say, I'm not contributing to the problem, I'm not doing anything wrong, they don't realize, we're not talking about blatant racism here in the KKK days. We're talking about just those subtleties that can have long-term effects on a group of people and how they feel about themselves. And if we can all kind of become more progressive, I think we can start to diminish that long-term.
It's like looking good for your age.
Yeah, instead of just looking good.
Yeah, exactly.
And we all do it. We all do it.
Yeah,
I have done it with so many different things, whether it's about age or gender or whatever, and I catch myself and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, thanks for highlighting that. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. So as we wrap up here, what I like to do is I like to end conversations with the question to the guest of, what does it mean to you to be bold?
Wow. I think it's bold to follow your heart. And that could be for me, in examples of my life, it was a lot with my career. Do I do what people expect me to do, what I've been trained to do? Do I stay on the path that I'm so invested in? Or do I follow my heart and believe in myself? Being bold has meant having bravery to get to know yourself. So a lot of the independent traveling that I did, to me, that was being bold. Just bold enough to be present with yourself and know that that's enough. That's being bold to me. So to me, it's any expression where you're doing something that may bring you some discomfort. Even like the conversation we just had. It's like, okay, someone you barely know, someone with a different skin color and experience, might be a little uncomfortable, but let's just give it a try. Mm-hmm. So being bold is, to me, anything that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, but the purpose behind it is going to make it worthy for you to pursue.
Yeah. And you know what, like that conversation, as long as it's coming, as you said, if it's coming from a good place, or that's how I interpreted it. It's like, if it's coming from a good place, then you can be open to a dialogue. But if that's the problem, is that a lot of conversations aren't coming from a good place.
Just judgy,
right
judgy,
now.
judgy.
Yeah, it's really difficult.
Condemning.
But if it is, thank you. You enlightened me. Like that example of the pink ribbon.
Oh,
no,
okay,
the pink ribbon, it's like breast cancer. It's like, oh yeah, I totally get the importance of that. Like when you made that correlation, I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense to me. But I just hadn't made that kind of correlation. But that was super helpful. So and one last thing here is, where can people find you?
So right now on Instagram, if they're on Instagram, they can find me at official Tanji Johnson. And the official is easy, Johnson is easy, Tanji is spelled Tanji.
great. That is pretty easy. So Instagram is the best place?
Instagram is the best place. They can go to my website, tanjijohnson.com, and they'll click on a link to email me, even though it's a little bit dated, so I don't necessarily send people there. But Instagram is, and Facebook, I'm under Tanji Johnson, but of course you have to try to friend request people. So Instagram, I think, is the easiest.
Okay, great. We'll look for you there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, if you haven't already, I want you to put down whatever you're doing, assuming you're multitasking while listening to this, and I want you to do an internet search for Tanji Johnson, Tanji Johnson, and just check out the images for this woman. Now, I didn't suggest that you do this at the beginning because I just wanted you to hear her voice, but now I want you to check her out. She is incredible. You can find all episodes of the She's Bold podcast, as well as links to all the things we talked about at shesboldpodcast.com/episodes or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Next week on the She's Bold podcast, I have Liz Grantham, who I just really want to call Lady Grantham. Liz is the founder of the Optimal Me, a fantastic fitness app for folks over 50. If you'd like to support the show and let me know how much you are inspired by these conversations and how much you look forward to hearing the uplifting stories from my guests, go to patreon.com/bebold. Patreon supporters at just $5 a month get to submit questions for me to ask guests and become part of our private Facebook group. And that is ladies only. They also get access to bonus content, including questions I ask of the guest. To keep up with me, you can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram at both Beth Whitwa and Wandergal. So it's BETHWHITWA and Wandergal, WANDERGAL. Feel free to leave a message or question at 877-280-5170. I really, really appreciate feedback. It's great for me to hear from you and to know that you're out there. So even just a little note that says, hey, listening to you, loved the episode, hated the episode, whatever it is, just let me know. You can also email me at beth@shesboldpodcast.com. Let me know if you have suggestions for future guests or topics, or if there's anyone you'd like me to bring back to the show. Ladies, you can join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Be Bold group for support and encouragement for whatever ways you're trying to be bold. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. And until next time, be bold.